The next phase. Geordi and Ro refuse to accept that they're dead.
The Enterprise is heading for a Romulan ship that is about to explode, and when they establish audio contact, Picard identifies their ship as simply the Enterprise, with no mention of them being a Starfleet vessel. I thought that was a little weird.
Riker, Worf, Geordi, and Ro transport over to assist, and because Ro again has not been on the show for a while, we get a reminder that she has an attitude.
Geordi and Ro examine the engine and determine that a part of it will need to be replaced.
They're going to replicate a new one, but they have to take the broken one back to the Enterprise to do so.
When Geordi and Ro are being beamed back, something goes wrong and they can't materialize.
And apparently their patterns are lost.
Which doesn't make sense because they should be saved in the computer. So they should be able to at least materialize new versions of them anyway. Like they did with Picard back in The Lonely Heart, or whatever. What was that episode called?
Lonely Among Us.
Data tells Picard they don't seem to have transported anywhere else, and Troy can't sense them, which doesn't mean much, but we've already seen transporter signals get intercepted, as in Data's day.
But the Romulan ship is still going to explode, so Picard sends more people over via shuttle, and they move the Enterprise away.
They have to jettison part of the ship, but they can't get the door that separates it closed until Data gets there and does it himself.
And the Enterprise extends its shields to cover the Romulan ship from the explosion.
Picard heads toward sickbay and doesn't react to Ensign Ro lying on the ground in the hallway.
She wakes up and heads to sickbay herself, but the doors will not auto-open, and no one reacts to her in any way.
And she finds that her communicator doesn't work. She overhears Picard and Beverly talking about filling out her death certificate, then Picard walks right through her as he leaves. She also finds that her hands pass right through the computers.
And of course it makes a sound effect whenever she does it. Meanwhile, the Enterprise is transferring power to the Romulan ship and working on getting them moving again.
Data examines the transporter diagnostic readings and finds a fluctuation that he says he will check out.
And he also requests to arrange and conduct Geordi's memorial service.
Because he considered Geordi his best friend.
Robots don't have friends. Worf expresses his concerns to Riker because the Romulans are asking for a computer, and Riker suggests giving them one from 40 years ago. I was not aware that they kept things from 40 years ago just lying around on the ship. I would expect bones to still be wandering in the hallways, I guess.
And I wondered how a computer used by a different species would be useful to them anyway.
In the future, all technology throughout the universe is standardized.
They actually use USB for everything. Okay.
They're up to like USB 3000, USB triple Z.
Ro finds Geordi in engineering, going through the same thing she is, but they find that they can see each other and they don't pass through each other.
Ro says with confidence that they are dead. The end. And Geordi is incredulous.
Are you saying I'm some blind ghost with clothes?
I thought that was the best line of the episode. She says that they need to make peace with their former lives, but Geordi says F that and goes to figure out the situation.
He heads to a transporter room where he listens to Data explaining to the new transporter chief that the damaged Romulan ship was emitting chronoton particles, which traveled to the Enterprise via the transporter beam. And he says he will go to the Romulan ship to determine the source of the particles.
Ro goes to the bridge to say goodbye and is able to touch her chair and the panel, which I thought she would address either now or later, but it doesn't come up again.
She overhears Picard and Riker talking about the memorial service, when Riker says he will say some words about her, which surprises her. She must have forgotten about how they banged in Conundrum. When Riker leaves, Ro tries to say thank you to Picard for bringing her on the ship, and it's a good thing he didn't pull up his space porn while she was in there, as seen in The Bonding.
Come.
Damn it, Captain.
Counselor.
Geordi zips in and says they need to get on Data's shuttle to get over to the Romulan ship. He believes whatever happened to them, the answers are over there.
And I wondered why they don't just pass through the shuttle.
You can't say those things because that's all in my wrap-up.
On the shuttle, while Geordi and Ro listen, Data talks to Worf about the memorial ceremony, and how he's not sure what kind of ceremony it should be, given that Geordi was human and Ro was Bajoran.
He also tells Worf what a friend Geordi was to him, and it was very moving. And Worf responds by saying he was glad Geordi was dead.
Because now he'll get more screen time. He He says he's glad that Geordi died an honorable death in the line of duty.
The Romulans don't understand why Data wants to investigate stuff on their ship, and he says they need to stop the Chronoton emissions just in case.
Because they may interfere with the new engine.
Geordi has his head stuck inside a piece of equipment.
And I wondered how he could see if it's sealed off from outside. Wouldn't it be dark in there?
He recalls some research of combining a phase inverter and cloaking device, and thinks that's probably what happened to them, and there's probably a way to dephase themselves.
He says that means they would have no substance, but that would mean that light would pass right through them so they couldn't see each other, but they shouldn't be able to see anything at all because then their eyes wouldn't pick up any light. And they shouldn't be able to talk because they're not affecting the air around them.
And if they manage to dephase themselves, why does that automatically mean they decloak themselves? And I also like how that piece of super secret equipment is right out in the open in the center of the room.
Well, they weren't anticipating having Enterprise people on board.
Yeah, but once they came on board, they could have moved it out of the way. Could have put it in a Romya closet. I'm not going to put that in. That's so dumb.
They overhear the Romulans talking about a plan to cause some particles to accumulate on the Enterprise that will cause it to explode when they go to warp.
And they do this because they're afraid the Enterprise will discover their secret project. Geordi says they have to get back to the Enterprise to try and warn them, and I guess they're lucky someone was heading back on a shuttle right then.
And when they leave, one of the Romulans gets up and follows them, phasing through stuff on the way.
How he managed to also get aboard that tiny shuttle without Geordi and Ro seeing him, I don't know.
Back on the Enterprise, Data detects new Chronoton fields, and Geordi determines that they are forming in the places where he and Ro were passing through matter.
Essentially leaving Chronoton footprints.
Data sends the transporter chief to the bridge to do a different scan to further pinpoint the fields, and Ro goes after her to see what turns up.
When Geordi gets hit directly by Data's anion beam, it causes it to get harder to phase.
And he realizes that they could use a stronger beam to dephase themselves.
Ro is on the bridge and is confronted by the phased Romulan, and he tells Ro to take him to Geordi, but she manages to escape both him and the slowest traveling weapon beam we've seen in a while.
As they run through the ship, they create more Chronoton fields as they phase through walls, and thankfully they don't interrupt anything inappropriate for network TV.
He eventually manages to take her down, but Geordi makes it there just in time and phases his ass through a wall out into the endless abyss that is space. I know yours was probably boring. It was like, he pushes him through a wall.
I just said he shoves him out into space, yeah. Ro grabs his weapon and they go to the bridge, where there is no evidence of what the Romulans are planning for the Enterprise. When the Romulan ship is repaired, Picard says he hopes it will lead to more cooperation between them in the future.
As do I, Captain.
That Romulan commander, what a piece of shit. Oh, it made me so mad. The show does a great job of making us hate other species. And he's about to go to warp, but Data stops him and says he wants to eradicate the Chronoton fields before they do it.
Geordi and Ro decide to go to 10 Forward, where the memorial ceremony is taking place, so they can create as many fields as they can and have them flood the area with the anion beams, which may cause them to become visible.
They say just for a millisecond, and if it was truly a millisecond, even if someone was looking right at them, would that be enough?
Probably not.
The memorial service is done in New Orleans style, and the instrument playing versus the instrument sound was particularly awful in this episode. I'm surprised the instrument sounds match the instruments we saw.
Ro starts firing the Romulan weapon around, creating Chronoton fields all over the place.
And it causes Data to say they should flood 10 Forward with an anion beam, but it's not enough.
So Ro sets the weapon to overload, and they run and hide in a corner, which wouldn't do anything if the explosion is just going to phase through everything.
But not them.
Well, since they're all phased, it should phase through them too. It doesn't make any sense.
I just shrugged. That's my rating for this episode, is just a shrug. It causes the Chronotons to go off the charts, so they hit the room with a super duper anion beam.
Which finally makes them visible to Data and Picard, but only for a little while.
Longer than a millisecond, I would say. Data puts it all together, and they manage to dephase and decloak Ro and Geordi.
And Geordi alerts them to the problem with the ship and not using the warp engines.
and I noticed nobody asked any questions about what the hell just happened.
Everyone is just super happy to see them when they should all just be confused about how they're alive and where they came from.
And what the hell's going on?
Later, Geordi and Rose sit in 10 forward, where Geordi says they haven't eaten for 2 days. Did they sleep at some point? Or go to the bathroom? I guess it would just phase through the floor.
And Ro reflects on the recent experience versus her Bajoran beliefs. And Geordi makes a joke, and we get a very awkward, laughing finish. It was like the end of a Scooby-Doo episode. The next phase, overall,
I was very intrigued by the Romulan side of this episode at the beginning. I thought it would be cool to see what might come of them working together with Starfleet, but when the episode shifted to Geordi and Rose's predicament, I was very disappointed. I knew there was going to be some dumb fake science stuff, and that it wasn't going to make much sense, and it turned out I was right. It wasn't anywhere near as bad as a lot of the other episodes we've gotten like that, but the seriousness with which they handled it, and the focus they put on it, made me keep thinking about how many things didn't make sense. Adding in the phased Romulan had me interested again for a little while, but they didn't do anything with it, and then he was gone.
Are you sure you didn't just copy and paste my notes?
On a character front, I liked what they did with Ro, and I didn't have a problem with the way anyone else was handled other than the stereotypical villain Romulans, but the episode was really about solving Geordi and Rose's problem, which made the issues with it more obvious. If they had focused on the character side of things and less on the fake science, and not had the Romulans just turn out to be one-note villains, and at least had some disagreement amongst them, I think this could have been a much better episode. But I didn't think it was bad. I enjoyed it for what it was. I gave it a C.
I gave it a C-. I liked that the urgency of the opening situation really didn't give enough time at the moment to address that Geordi and Ro had died, and I'm doing a similar thing here right now by putting my positive comment at the beginning. But after that, the episode was not great. We've had investigation episodes before that were awesome, even ones that also focused around Geordi. This one wasn't very compelling, mainly because we had characters on both sides, phased and dephased, who were dropping exposition bombs the whole time. They didn't really have to figure anything out. They already knew everything, we just had to wait for them to say it out loud. It didn't really add a lot to the phased character's development either. Yes, Ro got her little humility bit at the end, but we had to sit through an entire not super interesting episode just to get that. I felt like there needed to be something else. That could have been done with the phased Romulan. It was a nice twist, but I'm disappointed it didn't go anywhere. It went from, watch out, to, alright, he's gone. I'm glad phasing through people had no ill effects, since they unnecessarily ran through a bunch of people for no reason. And Rose's chase scene was pretty dumb. She could have just stood inside of a wall, or, gone in any direction other than a straight line, since nothing would have stopped her. Run in a zigzag, do a big spiral, anything. It was also nice, no one phased through the floor, which granted is the case in almost everything I can think of in the invisible episode of every show ever, and it always bothers me. The phasing would also pose way more problems to get around. They are very lucky that everybody else was conveniently going to wherever they wanted to go, including other ships out in space. And I would have thought that as smart as he is, Geordi could have come up with a way to use the chronoton fields to communicate. Could he have written a ghostwriter level message with chronotons? Could he have done some sort of Morse code? Just continually phasing in and out of stuff while yelling at Data to get it didn't really seem in character for him. And this show, even as far as Season 5, is still not great at conveying how much time has passed. Geordi mentioned they were phased for 2 days. They seemed pretty cool for not having eaten or had water in 2 days. It could have added something to the episode to have them start to not think clearly from dehydration or experience any side effects at all. This was definitely a weaker episode in this season, and seeing as how Ro hasn't been showing up very much, it wasn't a great way to build her character for the times that she is around.
I will say that I did like the stuff between her and Riker, but I wish it had actually come to some kind of conclusion.
She shot him in the head. What else do you want?